Numbers that we're taking in are astronomical. We're taking in tremendous amounts of money with the tariffs. We were treated very unfairly on trade, and countries are having a hard time getting used to the fact that they can't do that to us anymore.
That was Donald Trump on Thursday talking about the money coming in from his administration's tariffs. But the U.S. president also suggesting that trade deals with other countries are coming, including with China. Where does this leave Canada in the trade war? Katherine Tai served as President Joe Biden's trade representative from 2021 to 2025. Ambassador Tai joins me now live from Washington. Nice to see you, Ambassador.
Nice to see you again.
So this week, President Trump said tariffs are making the U.S. rich. And he talked about money coming in from cars, steel, aluminum, baseline tariffs. As the former USTR, what do you make of Donald Trump's strategy so far?
Well, let me at the very top of this conversation with you recognize that Canadians today are undoubtedly feeling significant challenges coming from the words and actions of this current U.S. administration. Words and actions that are threatening Canadians' sovereignty, national security, and economic security. And that the words and actions on trade and tariffs are obviously a big part of that. At the end of our administration, which was only a couple months ago, you saw a cross-administration focus on three main challenges that, frankly, are still existing today. The first one being China's commitment to a manufacturing and export-driven economic recovery for its economy post-COVID, and the prospects of a China shock 2.0 that not just the United States is facing, but partners like Canada and the rest of the world will be facing too. The second challenge that pre-exists this administration is the fact that our supply chains remain incredibly vulnerable and fragile, especially in the face of crises and shocks. And that remains true today. And the third is these rising levels of economic inequality that we are seeing around the world. And certainly here in the United States, levels of inequality that we haven't seen since the Gilded Age of the original robber barons. I make those points just to emphasize that even before the current challenges that the Trump administration has initiated, that these challenges remain and remain significant for economies like that of the United States and for Canada.
So what does that mean then for the U.S. economy? And obviously Canada will feel that as well, though, Ambassador Tai. Do you feel as though the United States is headed towards a recession given these self-inflicted wounds the president has chosen?
So this is where I know that feelings are running very high. I'm certain in Canada, as they are running very, very high here in the United States. I feel that my value added is really to bring a sober analysis so that we can all figure out how to navigate this period of time successfully. I think what's important to focus on is that despite what seems like very muddled messaging, that this current U.S. administration should still care about these pre-existing challenges. And to your point about what partners like Canada can do about it, in terms of the negotiations that are to come, I see Canada and also Mexico as being differently situated from all of the other trading partners that are going through a similar kind of reaction to this administration's policies. And that's primarily because of the requirement under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. I know that in Canada, it's the CUSMA, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement. There's a requirement that the three countries come together by July 1st, 2026, to review the operation of the agreement and to decide whether they will commit to the continuation of the agreement. Because of that provision, I think that Canada and Mexico have an opportunity to think about themselves differently from the rest of the world and to really focus on where the negotiations and the opportunities will be to navigate this next period of time successfully.
I think that's probably reassuring for a lot of the country, but I also know that Canadian politicians are really speaking openly about the fact that they believe that CUSMA is essentially dead. The current Prime Minister, who, as you know, is in the midst of an election, has at least managed to get an agreement from the President to have a negotiation after the election with whoever wins about trade and security. Do you think that the starting point should be the USMCA?
I do see the USMCA and the CUSMA as the starting point. If you recall the history, the NAFTA was renegotiated by the first Trump administration, same president, and it was actually renegotiated twice. Once between the first Trump administration and Canada and Mexico, and then again between the Trump administration and congressional Democrats. This agreement still remains an important foundational trade agreement for the United States, but also for this administration and for all of the stakeholders and the political stakeholders who had a hand in forming this agreement. So from my perspective, this remains the foundation from which the United States must navigate its relationship and vice versa with Canada and with Mexico.
Are you concerned that countries like Canada and others are looking elsewhere? Obviously, we have geographic needs and constraints, but that Canada is going to open up trading relationships with other places in order to try and not replace the United States, but to grow in a different direction. Does that concern you at all?
So in terms of the pre-existing challenges, the second one that I enumerated around global supply chains that are too fragile, that remains the case today. And from our administration's perspective, the solution to that was a program in terms of trade agreements, trade policy on a worldwide basis that need to be focused on creating resilience in supply chains. One important part of resilience is diversification. Now, I think that it's still my hope that the three countries of North America will find their way to addressing shared challenges in terms of supply chain fragility, in terms of taking on the significant challenge from Beijing, in terms of economic competition, addressing anti-competitive economic pressures together as a shared challenge. But I think that this point of building diversification into trade is actually a really important part of creating more resilience in the global economy.
Ambassador Katherine Tai, really glad that we got you on the program. You are a very calm voice in a moment, and that is much needed. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, and happy Easter.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. We'll take a short